Hello, and welcome back to another episode of It's Always Sunny in Hollywood, where today we are taking a trip back to the past. We're talking about yet another Sam Raimi trilogy here today. The name's Lugia, Housewares.
My name is Patty, and man, those dead sure were evil, weren't they?
And my name's Red. Groovy.
I think we have some news, but we're not going to spend too much time on it. We don't really have much this go around.
Let's talk the Minecraft movie. No, a Minecraft movie. I'm never gonna get used to that. So we got our first teaser for it a few months ago, and it was a piece of media. We can all agree on that.
It was the trailer of all
But
time.
well, we got our first full trailer for it, and I'll give credit where credit is due. This trailer is much better than the first one, but
Was it though? Was it though?
I'm still not fully convinced. It did little
I'm
to
not
change how
either.
I felt about it.
Butter is
I'll
a
admit-
better is a relevant term. Is a relative term though.
I'll
so,
say
you know.
this: I'll say this: it got 2 chuckles out of me. That's
You
gotta
watch the
count for
movie,
something.
and
I
those are
don't
the
know.
only 2 chuckles.
Lugia, you had thoughts?
Um, I still don't think the movie still looks good as a whole. Like, I see some of the character models, specifically like the zombie and the skeleton, and I feel like at a standstill, they just look like they're AI generated. And it also doesn't help that the lighting is really, really bad. Like, there's this one shot where they're in a cave and light is coming from on top behind them, but like everything is still so brightly lit even behind them when it should be like dark. I don't get what they're going for here. I just don't think it looks like a good movie in general.
Again, I think this trailer is better, but I'm with you. I'm still not convinced on this.
I don't know, maybe kids will eat
But
it
I do
up.
have
They're probably the target
maybe
demographic for well, they're obviously the target
probably
demographic for this. But
apparently the Minecraft community is much more positive to this trailer.
I'm not surprised. I mean,
I'm not in the Minecraft community though. I can only speak as a general public moviegoer.
I know Red doesn't really count,
And
but we're Sonic fans and we're kind of hyped for Sonic 3. I kind of understand it.
Yeah, I mean, fans of games tend to like the adaptations for the most part, as long as you keep the right hallmarks.
and that is fair.
Unless it's like particularly story driven, like those are the only times I get upset. But like, who gives a fuck about the Minecraft story? No one does.
There was a Minecraft story mode. I don't think that has anything to do with anything though.
Yeah,
highly doubt.
that's not even like particularly all that popular. So Minecraft is a sandbox. You can do whatever with it.
I do have an amusing anecdote about this trailer, though. So I went to see the Wicked movie, and so this trailer played in front of it, but it played in front of it twice. First in standard format, then again in IMAX format, and everybody in the theater was very visually confused.
If you weren't convinced once, surely the second time will.
How was Wicked, by the way?
I loved it.
That's like the first act, right?
Yeah,
It's just a part 1. Okay.
it's just part 1. Again, no, Wicked was great. It's a Wizard of Oz adaptation, kind of like Oz the Great and Powerful, directed by Sam Raimi, who made Evil Dead. Speaking of Evil Dead,
So this just happened a
flawless.
few hours ago. Yeah, seamless transition. But this happened a few hours ago. They are making a new Evil Dead movie, and it just got name dropped. It's gonna be called Evil Dead Burn.
Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell actually said that they hope that Evil Dead, like, they keep making Evil Dead movies just forever.
They're
So-
not directly involved
Another
with the
one.
new movies, though, right?
Another one.
No, they produce them.
Oh, okay.
They haven't like directed them, but they're involved in the producing. Like they oversee it, but they don't like they're just on hands on.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, I guess this is the third movie in a new established trilogy. I mean, there's also like Ash versus Evil Dead, but that's a TV show, right?
That's a TV show, and also the new Evil Dead movies are like they're not following Ash. Ash versus Evil Dead is meant to be sort of a cap to the story of the original trilogy. It's it's what happens to Ash after the events of Army of Darkness.
And then this new trilogy is like its own continuity.
I don't know if it's own continuity, but like Ash hasn't shown up in them. I'm pretty sure it's like
Have you guys seen any of the new Evil Dead movies?
No, I've only seen.
I
The
saw
trilogy.
a little bit. I saw a little bit of the reboot. It was pretty good, and I've
Reboot?
heard that
Which installment?
the 2013.
Okay. I know there was one that came out last year.
I think that was called
Yeah.
Rise.
Yeah, which
Yeah, that's the one.
I've heard good things about all 5 of the Evil Dead movies. Here's a question: have either of you guys seen Drag Me to Hell?
No.
No.
Okay, so it's not an Evil Dead movie, but it is directed by Sam Raimi, and it's very similar in style to Evil Dead 2. So I know I usually give my recommendations at the end, but if you like Evil Dead, definitely check out definitely check out Drag Me to Hell. If you like any of the Evil Dead movies. I want to jump into the film?
Films plural, but yeah,
Yes.
let's take it one at a time. So let's start off with the original The Evil Dead, which was released in 1981 with a budget of $375,000 and made about 2.6 million, so pretty big, especially for what was basically just like a college project.
I didn't even like look this up. I just already know about all the behind the scenes, but the behind the scenes of this movie are really interesting. I know it's your movie, but
No, if you're
can
passionate
I?
about it, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so just brass tacks. Sam Raimi is one of my favorite directors of all time. I think I've mentioned this before at the other times I recommended his stuff, but this movie is basically Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, they're childhood friends, and they would make their own little like short films by themselves. But at one point, Raimi created a short film called Within the Woods, which was basically a prototype for The Evil Dead. And what he thought was a good idea was he would use this short film as a proof of concept and would basically go around to just a bunch of like random like people he knew and would show it to them and be like, give me money and I'll be able to make a feature length film. He was able to get money from like some lawyer from a lawyer to one of his friends. You know, after some begging, they were able to get about you already heard the budget, but yeah. Raymond was also able to get some of his like family members and like Campbell's family members to raise enough money. Production was interesting, so obviously they didn't have any stunt people or anything. So for the most part, filming of this movie was just Sam Raimi torturing his friends.
That is real,
Here's
actually. Yeah, I think Bruce Campbell got an injury one time, like a scar on his knee, and like every now
yeah,
and then Sam Raimi would poke at it with a stick.
Sam and Bruce they do things that would probably be highly illegal on a normal film set, but because they're best friends, no one cares.
Also, speaking of set, this was just straight up in a cabin in the woods. This wasn't like a studio
Yes,
or
yes.
anything.
They did just find a cabin in the woods.
And that did
Some
prove
random
to
ass cabin.
yeah,
Yep.
it did prove to
They
be a
just
little
rented it for like a
challenging
weekend.
because since it was such a remote area, for one, on the very first day of filming, the crew got lost. But also, when actors or crew members were injured, they did not have immediate medical treatment. Like the nearest hospital was like miles away. It was pretty brutal to work in that environment, and I believe some of the cast and crew did leave like as filming kept going. But it worked in the end. I mean, 2.6 million against a nearly 400K budget. That's nothing
Yeah.
to scoff at, especially for a bunch of people getting their foot in the door.
And you know what's really funny is one of the reasons this movie was such a financial success was due to the help of Stephen King, who somehow saw the movie, said it was great, and because of that, it was able to get like distribution and like a bunch of other people started to see it. So thanks Stephen King. If it wasn't for Stephen King, who knows? Sam Raimi may not have the career he has today. The Coen brothers may not have the career they have today, which is another thing I want to mention. This movie is also how the Coen brothers got their start.
Really?
Yes,
Hmm.
because here's the thing. After Sam filmed the movie, he needed someone to edit it. Because back then people didn't edit it digitally. You had to like physically cut film and stuff, so it wasn't something a guy could just do on them by themselves. So he went to a cheap editing studio that he found. So they didn't edit the movie, but they were the assistant to the editor of the movie, and they became friends. Because of this, Raimi told them about their how he got this movie made, and it was like, oh, you made like a little prototype short film, and then you got to get interested investors, which is what the Coen brothers then proceeded to do with Blood Simple, where they made a trailer and they used that to get funding and whatnot. And obviously, Raimi helped the Coens, and the Coens helped Raimi. They've had a relationship. Raimi's second film was actually written by the Coen brothers, and Raimi helped them, shoot Hudsucker Proxy and a couple other movies. I don't know how many people know that, but yeah, the Coen brothers, some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, are very close personal friends with Sam Raimi, who's best known for being like one of the bigger blockbuster horror, more of the in the pulp genre, which is kind of funny.
It is also funny how Raimi got his foot in the door with horror, even though he loves comedy more, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the sequels.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, if you notice in the credits, some people are credited as fake Shemp in the movie. That's because when they didn't have an actor, they would have like a stand-in and put a wig on, and they called it fake Shemps because during the Three Stooges, they would often have like they would do that for Shemp because sometimes Shemp would get sick, so they would have someone else like fill in. And yeah.
Maybe I'm jumping a bit ahead here, but I did see some like Three Stooges like gags in the second and especially third film. But
Oh
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
get to
yeah,
that.
they were a clear inspiration for those movies.
Absolutely.
This one they want to be a bit more like straightforward with the uncomfortable stuff.
The tree scene.
The infamous tree
I
scene
think
that was
that
just straight up.
that alone gave the
That
movie
is
an
probably
X
the most.
rating.
That is probably like the most iconic scene from the movie, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people that kind of view this movie as kind of like hokey, and because of that, like Raimi leaned into comedy for the next movie. But that scene is just genuinely uncomfortable, and it's probably why it was considered like one of like the great like scary movies of its time, even though like nowadays it probably isn't as much. And speaking of which, what'd you guys think of the film?
Well, should we get into the plot
So,
first?
I mean,
I mean, we could just
there's not
briefly
much of
go
a
over it.
plot.
Yeah, but like we
Yeah.
could still just go over it.
All right, yeah.
So, five dumb young adults, namely Ash, his girlfriend Linda.
Ashley. His name is Ashley. Let's make that very clear.
Okay, got it.
Ashley Williams.
So Ashley, his girlfriend Linda, his sister Cheryl, his best friend Scott, and Scott's girlfriend Shelly decide to go in a cabin in the woods, not rent it whatsoever, just barge right in and, just have a nice, comfy little spring break until they discover the actual fucking Necronomicon and a tape recording of a man who previously lived in the cabin explain his findings on the Necronomicon, and he says some words that unleash the evil dead, or as the rest of the series calls them, Deadites. And every time someone dies, they turn into a Deadite, and their numbers grow. And it gets to a point where the numbers shrink down until Ashley is the only one who is left, and he needs to survive. And that's basically it, except of some inconsistencies. So
Yeah.
we'll
They
get to that later, though.
They're basically zombies, but they want to sort of combine them with the demons from the Exorcist movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically just kind of a zombie movie, just surviving these monsters. It's actually really funny, like viewing this after seeing the other two movies, because
Like Ash.
so this
Well,
this trilogy is basically known as like the Ash Williams show, because Ash is one of like the great sort of protagonists. He's like such a funny, dumb character. But in this movie, he's such a minor presence. Like Ash is probably like the least interesting character in the movie. Like the fact that he's the one that survives is honestly kind of funny. And that's so funny, like looking back on, considering Ash is considered such a big personality. He's such like a tour de force. It's almost like if like I don't know, it's like if Han Solo was really boring in the first movie, and then 2 and 3 were just about him. Like that's kind of what it's about. Like it's kind of funny.
he feels like a very, very standard protagonist. Well, not even like a protagonist. He just kind of feels like a side character. He's like about as interesting as the other characters in the same room who don't have much personality either.
Yeah, this is like a generic kind of slasher movie cast, but like and then in the sequels, like it's such a change because like he's got such a distinct personality.
And that's also because when they filmed this movie for the first time, Bruce Campbell didn't really know how to act. And he even said himself, like, yeah, when I first filmed this movie, like, I didn't know shit about acting. And it wasn't until Evil Dead 2 where he really hit his stride as Ash Williams.
Even though this is like very clearly an amateur film, it's got like that kind of appeal that like One Cut of the Dead or Who Killed Captain Alex got.
It has a kind of
One-
low budget charm to it. Where you can definitely
Yeah.
see, like, despite the budget, they are putting their heart and soul into everything.
Yeah, and honestly, there is a lot of like very creative shots, and it's like it is like somewhat visually impressive.
I think of the three, in terms of cinematography, this is my favorite one. I mean, I couldn't care less about some of the shots that just draw out suspense. Like, some of them are needlessly long. But I think the use in creative camera angles, like when Ashley is going down the stairs and you see, like, the camera, like, from a top view, Or was that the second movie? I don't know. Some of these blend together. But actually, I think it was like
If the shot
underneath.
you're describing is what I'm thinking of, it was in the second one.
Okay. Then it was underneath the staircase in the cellar in the first one. Then I think camera angles like that really heighten this from a cinematic point of view, and I can't help but love it. I know people say 2 is like the cream of the crop when it comes to Evil Dead, and that's totally fair, but this first movie is still pretty effective as like a standard horror film to me.
2 is basically kind of like replaced 1 in a lot of people's consciousness just because like it does fundamentally have the same story, and it's got much more of like a unique personality that would sort of define the rest of Raimi's filmography. But this is like a very respectable horror flick, and honestly, the fact it is like an effective horror movie does kind of like reveal like the intentions with the sequels. Where like he could have made it scarier if he wanted to, but he intentionally chose to make it a comedy, and that makes it like it's very clear, watching this and that back to back, that he's like, these are intentional choices. The stop motion effects were kind of cool too.
I always loved
I saw those.
the light bulb filling up with blood and how like the whole room becomes red. Also with the
That's such a like a
the
simple like
camera.
little trick too. Like
Yeah. The camera in the cellar as well, that's like playing movie footage and it gets stained with red and the projection is red. Like it's so good. Like I gush about the cinematography in this movie every fucking time I see it.
it's like honestly kind of small details when you think about it, but like they're just like
It adds
it's
so
very creative.
much.
Yeah, it's so creative.
Well, I think we've been going on about what we liked. Actually, Patty, what do you think about Evil Dead since you're kind of a newbie to the series?
Correct. I prior to this, Evil Dead was another one of those trilogies that I knew by name only. Like I knew it was Sam Raimi, but like I knew nothing of the plot or characters or anything. And after seeing this OG trilogy, I'm with you guys. Like I'm a fan. Here's the best
Okay,
way I can put it.
Now, when you say that,
You know
were you
what? You know
convinced
what?
by the first film or after you saw all 3?
The first film.
Okay.
It's weird. You know what movie came to my mind as I was watching the first movie?
What's that?
Steven Spielberg's Duel.
yeah,
I know it might seem
because
weird.
they're
Hear
both
me out.
debuts. They're
Hear me
both
out.
scrappy. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, like it's a debut film from an iconic director. And from the offset, you look at the premise, you're like, that's the most basic premise you could imagine on such a low budget. But you can see the heart and soul, how they really do make the most out of the premise. Like they keep making it feel fresh. Like I felt that with Duel, and I definitely feel it here with this Evil Dead movie. Because I mean, it's just a group of people in a cabin in a haunted woods. Like there's nothing special about it. But again, the cinematography, the visuals, the sound design, like it all feels so fresh because he's definitely making the most out of what he has. So I'd say if you like Evil Dead 1 and 2, check out Duel. That's my recommendation.
Okay, guys, want to talk about the sequel?
Well, do we have any complaints about Evil Dead 1?
Nothing really, just beyond like
it does take.
it's low budget, like
I mean, it does take a
quality, and
bit
just the
getting
fact that
in.
it's slow.
That's
It's a
fair.
bit slow.
But I mean, like a lot of
Characters
horror,
aren't great, but like none of these are really things that like
you can see through the
I
cracks, but
expected.
like the
Yeah,
strengths far make up for it.
yeah. I don't know. This is like a movie where like you just kind of like inherently like measure your expectations going in. So like any issues aren't like too damaging because what'd you expect? It's like a low budget,
Yeah, it was their first film.
Well, it's like like it's not just their first movie, but like these are first movies from absolute nobodies. These aren't like people who went to film school. They aren't people who went to like in terms of like where they came from. This is probably like the most impressive debut film made after El Mariachi. El Mariachi is like the only movie that's like more impressive to me in terms of debut films.
If you don't
We
mind me
haven't
asking,
talked
whose
about
debut
El
film was that?
Robert Rodriguez. So he's the guy who directed, Sin City, the Spy Kid movies. That's another movie we're probably gonna be. That's another trilogy we're probably gonna talk about one day as a trilogy. It has an almost identical evolution where the second movie is practically a remake of the first movie, and then there's a third movie that goes in like a completely different direction as like a big action spectacle. It's interesting how similar they are,
Speaking
honestly.
of that
But
second movie, do we want to get into that
yeah,
second movie?
All right. So,
yes.
Evil
So
Dead 2 was released in 1987, approximately 6 years after the first movie, with a much bigger budget of $3.5 million, and it made just shy of $6 million. So it was, I wouldn't say like as successful by comparison, but it was still pretty big, all things considered.
It was given a somewhat limited release, and Evil Dead 2 definitely is what sort of became the real big cult classic. I'm sure to a lot of people, this is sort of the movie that like this is the movie that basically put Raimi on the map because Evil Dead was like it was a respectable showing. Crime Wave wasn't very successful. This is like the first movie that really got people's attention.
So originally, Evil Dead 2 would have been called Evil Dead 2, Evil Dead and the Army of Darkness, which is the most redundant fucking title I've ever heard. But also that last part, we'll get to that later.
You know, a lot of posters it says Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. So I don't know if like I don't think anyone ever refers it to as Dead by Dawn, but that is technically the full title, which is kind of funny.
Well, I have the DVD right in front of me, and I sure as hell don't see a Dead by Dawn on there.
I mean, there are some posters that have it. I don't know. It's not every poster, but some
Maybe
have it.
early on that was the title, but they decided to just simple it down to Evil Dead 2.
Probably, yeah. Also, notice how it's called Evil Dead 2 and not The Evil Dead 2.
Yes, they dropped the. It's like that scene in The Social Network, you know, drop the. It's clean. I think this one had less of a troubled production.
Yes, they actually did it in a
screenplay-wise-
studio this time, and not in just some random cabin in the woods.
Yeah, and you know, screenplay wise, everything was much more put together. I think that's probably like the first thing we're gonna notice. Like I said, for the first one, you can basically skip the summary. Here, I think there's actually a bit more. There's like actual like sequences and bits we can talk about, which is yeah.
Before we go into that, actually, so for this podcast specifically, I saw Evil Dead 2 first because from what I remembered, it was basically a remake of the first movie.
And it is. Yeah.
That's not entirely true, actually. It is intended to be a direct sequel. However, because
That makes no sense.
yeah, but here's the thing. So originally they wanted to use footage from the first movie as a recap, but they couldn't get the rights to their own movie somehow. I think
What?
I think they distribution rights were like sent to like too many different organizations, so they just couldn't get the rights to Evil Dead 1. So they had to make their own.
Is that why they retconned it to where it's just Ashley and Linda and nobody else?
Yes. They basically tried to
I
do
was
their
so
own
confused when the movie started. I'm like, what? Where's everybody? Like, I get they're dead, but it's showing them arriving at the cabin.
Yeah, but like they basically filmed their own recap. But like, do you remember how at the end of Evil Dead 1 where like the camera like comes flying at Ash and then he screams?
Yeah.
Cut that part, and then in Evil Dead 2 go to the part where he's like flying in the woods, and that's supposed to be how it continues. It doesn't make sense because the Necronomicon is burned in the first movie and the cabin collapses, but it, you know, technicalities.
So it's a remakeable then.
It's a requel, to quote Bruce Campbell.
All right, fair enough. I mean, it's not like the story was, the highlight of Evil Dead.
No.
So
Yeah,
it's not a huge deal.
But like
It's definitely, like-
everything that happened in the first movie, aside from the burning of the Necronomicon and whatnot, those are canon. Like all of Ash's friends dying in the woods was canon. They just don't address it.
even like from 2 to 3, like there's some inconsistencies. Like
We'll
canon
get
was
to that
never
too, yeah.
something that matters too much. Okay, so basically the first like 10 minutes is a recap, but just with Ash and Linda.
Then the next
you know-
20 minutes is a Tom and Jerry cartoon.
Yeah. But they got a whole second family, so it's not just like Ash by himself in this movie. It is like, he is with a different cast of characters, and I actually think this dynamic's a lot more interesting because they do not trust Ash, and it's kind of funny seeing this sort of like dynamic playing a part, and also all these characters have a lot more personality, I feel.
We should
Ash,
stress, these
obviously,
characters
has-
don't come until like halfway through the movie. You get a couple scenes with them going on a plane, and the main character of that separate cast, Annie, is the daughter of the professor who owned that cabin. So by the time they go to the cabin just to check up on him, they just see Ash all covered in blood with missing a hand, and they're like, what the fuck happened here?
It's really funny. Like this movie basically it's constantly doing some sort of bit, and then they always just throw in some twist or complication. Ash got like an evil hand, so he cuts it off with a
Dude,
chainsaw.
him fighting his hand is like the funniest shit I've seen in a
It's
while.
so good.
And then when he cuts
Yeah.
it off and puts it under a bucket, he props it down with farewell to arms. Like, dude, that gave me a good laugh.
Again, this movie is hilarious.
Again, it's basically a
Uh,
Tom and Jerry cartoon at that point, and
the
I'm all here
the
for it.
peak for me is the laughing scene where we see the transformation from Ashley to the legendary Ash Williams.
yeah.
Like the deer
Ash
head's
here,
laughing, the furniture's laughing, he's laughing.
The lamp is
Ash,
laughing and he just like bends back and forth with the lamp, and then like they laugh and he slaps his knee with his nub.
I think Ash here is one of my favorite characters in movies like
Oh,
ever. Here in Evil Dead,
absolutely. He's
he is
so
like my
good.
favorite. I think like that's the main reason like this movie kind of overshadows the first one so much is because the first movie, it's a pretty good horror movie. Here, it is the Ash Williams show, and Ash Williams is one of the greatest characters like ever. He is so funny. He's dumb, but like in such like a perfectly sort of dim-witted way. Like it's hard to describe, but like he's like the dumb kind of good-natured sort of like buffoon. Like you remember the himbo meme?
What?
No?
You don't remember himbos?
I mean, I am
Uh,
aware of what that means, but like,
Okay, well, like I'm saying that I think Ash is sort of a quintessential kind of himbo.
okay.
He's kind of like he's clearly like an athlete or something. So he's trying to act tough, but he's just like he's clearly like just a little bit dumb, but he's not like too dumb where he can't like figure things out. Like I don't. It's just like it works, and obviously like Bruce Campbell's face is so like kind of it's almost got like a Jim Carrey quality to it, where like he can do very cartoony stuff
He
with
wrote
it.
his own
yeah,
book
I
called
feel
If
like
Chins Could Kill.
Yeah,
I feel like in the
the
second and
chin of
third movie,
truth.
Bruce Campbell leans into like a Jim Carrey-esque performance because well, there's a scene in 3 that I think highlights that, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that when we get there.
Yeah, it does kind of remind me of The Mask almost, because like in The Mask, there's like a similar quality with like him sort of fighting himself, and I don't know, like maybe Jim Carrey when he saw like he watched like Liar Liar, like you remember Liar Liar, right?
Of
It was like,
course.
oh, the claw, and he's pretending like his arm is like I'm wondering if like Jim Carrey like saw Evil Dead
Oh,
2, and it was like, oh, maybe I
you
could do
know,
that.
that may not be true, but I can buy it.
Wait, when did Liar Liar come out?
97.
Like yeah, late. It came like
97?
years after this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It came out like
At that,
when
at that
Sam
point,
Raimi was
Evil
like an
Dead
actual like
was a
famous.
trilogy for a while.
That came out when Raimi actually was like famous. But yeah, it's kind of funny how like a significant amount of this is honestly like a one-man show, and like obviously like the room comes alive, and it's like, do you guys remember the Looney Tunes short Duck Amuck where like Daffy is fighting against the
Bugs
animator?
Bunny is,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one. That's a classic.
I feel like there are scenes in this movie where it feels like that because we know like that Sam Raimi likes to torture Bruce Campbell, so it almost feels like the Deadites are almost like a hand of God thing where it's just like they're just actively fucking with him. It's like it feels like the director is just saying fuck, like not in like a meta way, but like it's kind of like it's very funny. I feel like I'm saying it's very funny a lot, but like that is just sort of like the main thing to like take away. And like it's not to say like it isn't still scary. I do think when the lady is like in the whatchamacallit, in the basement and trying to like convince the people, like that actually is playing some like genuine like good suspense and horror. Like you actually do kind of feel like, ah shit, they're gonna believe her. Like it hits like all the right beats and dread.
All the strengths from the first Evil Dead movie are still here. Like the effects are still great, the cinematography is still interesting. And again, because it has a higher budget, you can see like I don't know what the word is, but you know what I mean.
Actually, fun fact, just going back to the first movie for a second. One of the things that Bruce Campbell hates the most when filming the Evil Dead movies is fake blood. But he gets drenched in fake blood like all the goddamn time. And like in the second movie, there is a scene where the wall bleeds out onto him and the room is like filling with blood. Maybe that's just Raimi torturing him again.
Yeah, probably.
In terms of criticisms, there's one thing about Evil Dead 2 specifically that always bothered me, and that's Ash's possession that happens a few times. How is this exactly different from like turning into a regular deadite? Like what exactly is like influencing Ash to become like this not dead entity?
I think
I'll be
because he
honest.
was possessed right when the sun was coming up, so maybe it's like half possessed, half not.
Yeah, and
And the part
obviously
of
in
him
the
that was
sequel,
possessed, he cut off. So I don't know.
it always kind of reminds me of like the classic zombie movie trope of like cutting off your hand before it gets infected. So like I don't know. It's kind of I don't remember the
But
details.
like
I'll be honest.
there's a
I saw this
part
like
where Annie and the
years
gang
ago.
are in the house and Ash is possessed, and then he like fights it off and he's like, I'm okay now, trust me. One, what's stopping him from turning possessed again? And two, I don't think she would even know that's possession. She could have just been another deadite to her. I feel like that part of the movie is like a little wishy-washy, but everything else about it is fine.
Continuity story, it's like it is secondary. This is basically a bits movie. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's just consistently fun. They're constantly putting in twists, and the ending is so good. What I love about all three of these movies is okay, well, not the third movie. What I like about the first two movies is that it always ends with things getting worse for Ash, which is like a really like kind of like dark, funny punchline. Said all three earlier because there are technically two cuts of Evil Dead, which of Army of Darkness, which we'll get into. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But in this
Um,
one, okay, so in the first one, Ash leaves the collapsed cabin, which isn't supposed to be collapsed according to canon, and one of the Deadites comes after him, and it cuts to him screaming, and then fade to black. In this one, Ash is sent through a fucking time vortex into the Middle Ages, where he is treated as a hero. That is
which is
quite the jump from the first movie.
Are we gonna get into that now?
Yeah, if you
Army of
got nothing
Darkness?
else to
yeah.
say about Evil Dead 2.
So
No. Evil Dead 2
I don't
is
know if this
absolutely
is
solid.
so I don't know if this is a hot take because I do think like Evil Dead 2 is the quintessential Evil Dead movie, but Army of Darkness I think is my favorite. It's the one I rewatched the most because I don't know, I just have a lot of fun with Army of Darkness. I think part of it is that like it is just more of like an action comedy, but with like it's such a unique medieval world. In a certain way, you can view Army of Darkness as almost like a parody of Berserk. They are completely unrelated because Berserk was being made at the exact same time the Evil Dead movies are being made. So they likely like had no influence on each other, but it's just like a funny coincidence with like both of them are about a dude who's being hounded by demons who cut off his arm. They look very similar. It's I just like it as a fantasy adventure. The opening like third of the movie is probably my favorite. Like is one of my favorite openings of all time. It's like up there with the Cowboy Bebop movie opening with like him fighting the demon. He's like, "This is my boomstick," and like I love that sequence so much. With like he's just getting his ass kicked. He's getting thrown in the well. He's like, it's such like a good scene sequence. It's almost like it kind of reminds me of like the opening sequence of like Return of the Jedi, but like even better. And yeah, I love it. Ash is hilarious in this movie with like the bit in the grave where it's like, what was it?
It was an N word. It had to have been an N word.
I, I have forgot it was like that because like I saw this before I knew about racism like the first time I saw it. So like that bit funny to me even like without that thing because fun fact the term the N word did not exist before the O.J. Simpson trial, so there was no implication like that is just an unfortunate coincidence that happened with history. But yeah, you got the evil Ash, which is really funny. The little tiny like dudes, like it so many. This one like feels very much like a Looney Tunes, almost like a SpongeBob movie, almost with like just a road trip and
I
coming
said
across these goofy adventures.
I said
I
that I
believe
felt Bruce Campbell's performance got more Jim Carrey-esque as it went on. In this movie in particular, the scene that I think exemplifies that, well, two scenes that lead into each other, is when he's opening the book or trying to figure out which book is the right one, and his face gets stretched out, and he has to
yeah,
shake it to
yeah.
get it back in position. And when he's fighting against his evil self, like both those scenes, I'm like, these both seem right out of the mask.
And of course, it gets very Looney Tunes with him getting like poked in the eye and whatnot.
And of course, the Three Stooges gags with
Yeah,
poking in
yeah,
the eye,
that's what.
Also, not to
the
rain on
yeah.
not to rain on your parade, but we did kind of skip over the background for Army of Darkness.
Right. Double back on that. I just did want to say, Patty, did this remind you of the Dungeons and Dragons movie? Because I feel like it did. It reminded me.
Um, a little bit. Not a
Like
whole
I
lot, but
just
a little bit. With the skeletons.
like there's just like some. I feel like visually it was like inspired, like the way like the kind of like puppets, kind of like the
I can see it.
yeah,
I can see it.
yeah. I guess it is kind of funny fitting after we talk about like that Hansel and Gretel thing too, huh? And mine Monkey Bone. We're just like, we were doing like a bad movie trilogy, but it's kind of like if you look in a sort of way, kind of weird sort of special effects movie trilogy too. But go on. Okay.
All right.
Army of Darkness behind the scenes.
All right, so Army of Darkness, or Evil Dead 3, if you want to call it, was released in 1992 with the budget of $11 million and made about 21.5 million, so bigger budget, bigger payoff. Originally, this would have been called Medieval Dead, which honestly I think is actually kind of a funny name for this, but they went with Army of Darkness.
That's actually great.
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
disappointed now.
but they went with
And
Army of
that
Darkness
that
as
sure
a
reminds me.
carryover from the original Evil Dead 2 title.
Now I'm wondering if Medieval was like inspired by this movie because that seems really obvious now. Medieval, Evil Dead.
Probably.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't have too many fun facts, but I do have a couple. So, continuing with the trend of Raimi just really likes to torture Bruce Campbell, there is a scene where Ash is pelted with rocks, and they are supposed to be fake rocks, obviously. However, sometimes Raimi would just throw potatoes just so he could get like a realistic reaction out of him. The cuts of him using the potatoes are actually in the final movie.
Huh.
Army of Darkness was a bit of a weird movie for Campbell to do because it was more action focused. So he had to go off of a number system since the opponents that he was fighting were not like real, obviously. And Raimi himself would make the scenes as complex as possible, and Bruce would always fuck them up. Those scenes took like maybe 37 takes, give or take. And finally, there was a point during filming where Bruce Campbell got a serious cut on his face, with the armor from one of the other actors, like scraping off it when he flips him over. So they immediately went to go see a plastic surgeon. However, upon seeing all the fake cuts on his face, they're like, which one is it?
Right. Yeah, I did remember hearing that story.
And you did mention that this movie had two different endings, so we could probably go into that if you wanted to.
So here's the thing. So this movie was originally called like Evil Dead 3. And there's a sort of pattern with all the Evil Dead movies that it ends with Ash having a horrible time. However, because Army of Darkness, they wanted to sort of make it its own standalone thing, and they want to sort of have much more of a traditional thing, they decided to go with a different ending, but they filmed both of them. So the original ending was Ash after he, said the magic words. He doesn't wake up in modern times. He wakes up in the apocalypse, like hundreds of years in the future.
I don't think he even says the words. I think that's why he gets transported into the dystopian future, because he didn't say them. He just drinks the potion and goes to sleep.
Either way, he messes it up and he ends up and he's just like, oh, what the hell? And then it just ends. It just ends there. And I thought that would have been so funny. But here's the thing. While I think that ending is so funny, I fucking love the ending of this movie as is. It's like the right cheesy note to end on. And it kind of mirrors like the opening scene to me. Like I almost kind of feel like the opening scene and the ending scene of this movie are like my favorite scenes in the whole film. Just because like I think they're just like so perfectly done. But yeah, it's like shop smart, shop S smart. It's like, the fucking shotgun to I fucking love it. It's great. A rare movie where both endings are great, in my opinion. Up there with like Little Shop of Horrors, I guess. Although I think they pulled it off a little bit smoother here.
If I could step in and give my piece for a second. Red, I know you said this was your favorite of the trilogy, correct?
Yes.
And you said you really liked the opening. I'm going to be honest, this movie of all the Evil Dead movies took the longest for me to get into.
That's totally fair.
And it's
that is fair.
It's a few things. One, the sudden shift in scenery, because now we're in medieval times, and it's such a jarring shift from the one cabin. So that was a bit to get into. And also, this one obviously has a much bigger budget, so you can see like with the camera quality and the visuals and everything, it's more high budget. So it took a while to get used to both the new technology and the new setting at the same time.
I think I'm on a similar boat with you. So I have seen the first two movies before I recommended it for the podcast. I did not see Army of Darkness until very recently for this episode. And I noticed it was basically having a lot of winks and nods to specifically the second movie. It kind of reminded me a lot of Back to the Future Part 3, where they keep jokes running that were specifically in the sequel and not the first movie. And there's nothing really wrong with that. It's just something I thought I'd point out. But this is trying to be more of its own thing than Back to the Future Part 3 was. I think a lot of the gags are pretty funny. You mentioned the graveyard scene. I love the scene like where he escapes the pit from I think in the filming process they called the deadite in the pit bitch. or the dead bitch. I don't remember which one specifically. It's one of those. I love the speech that he gives about the shotgun and saying, like, this is S-Mart's top of the line. You could find it in your local S-Mart today. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. That is one of the most iconic scenes in the whole franchise, right up there with the laughing scene from 2 for me.
I also like how he's a protagonist, but he's like also very clearly just kind of like a dumb dick. So
Yeah,
I kind of like, or
he's
like after he just immediately
Well,
just goes
after
into like
all the
full
shit
heathen
he's
was like,
been
oh,
through, man,
I mean, yeah,
after all
at the
the shit
same
he's
time, you
been
get
through,
it,
and
but
now
like,
he's back in the Middle Ages, he's like, man, fuck.
his friends are dead. The one
I
person
just
he
want
loves
to
is
go
dead.
home.
He gets sent back in time.
He's
He's
drenched
taken
in
into
blood. He's missing a hand.
slavery. He gets thrown into a pit. He comes out alive. He's just fucking done.
Let's be real. You'd be done too if you went through all that.
Also, one little detail that I loved, there's a part in Evil Dead 2 where Ash looks into the mirror and it like chokes him until it's revealed it's like a hallucination. In this movie, when he sees a mirror, he just breaks it. He's like, I'm not putting up with that shit again. But that proves to be a
The
mistake.
little mini Ashes start tormenting him, a la
Yep.
Gulliver's Travels. That's the point of the movie where I was like, okay, now we're getting on track. Now I'm in.
As for the plot itself, it's okay. It's nothing special. It does try to be a bit more than the other 2 movies, but Ash goes from a jackass to a slightly less jackass. I didn't really feel too much with like some of the supporting cast, but I mean, for what it was all right. Like it was serviceable. The main appeal is the comedy. I think that's why you're watching Army of Darkness, is just to have a laugh.
yeah,
Comedy and the effects.
Yeah.
Like, I love the work they did on the skeletons.
yeah, it has like a similar appeal to me as like a Monty Python would, where it's just like you're just watching like kind of a slapstick adventure movie rather than something scary. Overall, all 3 movies are great. I'd probably rate them all equally, honestly. Even like if I have my preferences. I mean, sometimes I think 2 is the better movie. Sometimes I think 1's the better movie. Sometimes I think 3 is. It's just I generally like enjoying to revisiting 3 the most, but I revisit them all.
You can call me a basic bitch, but my ranking is a 2-1-3.
I like 1 and 2 equally, both for different reasons. I don't like 3 as much, but it's still a good watch. I just don't really think too much of it. I think that's it. That's our Evil Dead trilogy retrospective, if that's what they call it.
And
And they're all good.
yeah, who knows? And
They are.
maybe one day we'll talk about Drag Me to Hell, and because I'll be honest, I think Drag Me to Hell might be the best one. Or I don't know, because it doesn't have. Again, just like all of Sam Raimi's horror movies are just incredibly consistent, good films. It's kind of hard to like pick a favorite, honestly. But yeah,
I have a question for Red. Is there a Sam Raimi movie he's made that you don't like, or at least not like as much?
I mean, I obviously I'm not big on Doctor Strange 2. It has some scenes I like. I don't hate it, but overall, I thought that was a disappointing film. Oz the Great and
You'd say that's the
Powerful,
weakest?
probably yeah. It and Oz the Great and Powerful. Oz the Great and Powerful again. It has some good scenes, but it's like very clearly like compromised. There's also Crime Wave. I generally don't remember anything about Crime Wave. I can't remember if it's good or not.
Critical reception says no.
Well, yeah, but like critical reception isn't always like right, but yeah.
And that's
I'm not
partly
sure.
why they did Evil Dead 2, was because of the failure of Crime Wave.
Like Crime Wave, from my understanding, is like is a very specific sort of parody, and like I think I might rewatch it. I might like it just because like, it does parody stuff that I'm familiar with. There are like 2 movies of his I haven't seen yet. For the Love of the Game and The Gift. Those might suck. I don't know. From my understanding, they don't have like as much of the Sam Raimi like flair to it as all the others. I don't know if you remember A Simple Plan not having the flair, but like I from understand those 2 movies are kind of like A Simple Plan where it doesn't really have a style that much. Although I do feel A Simple Plan does sort of tap into something great. I mean, obviously A Simple Plan is like one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah, it's kind of funny that Sam Raimi is my favorite director, but like I think his best movie is the one that does not really feel like him that much. But yeah.
All right.
All right, if that does it for Sam Raimi, at least for now, I believe it's my turn.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so as of the time we are recording, it is December, so holiday movie time.
Yes.
So trim up the tree, light the menorah, and do some third thing related to Kwanzaa. So this is a movie I've brought up a few times in the past, and I nearly chose it once, but didn't. Well, we're going all in now. So I don't even really have much of a build-up. Next week, we're taking a look at what many consider a modern Christmas classic, and that is Arthur Christmas.
All right.
All
Yeah.
right.
When you said modern, I was like, is like it's either gonna be Arthur Christmas or it's gonna be no. Actually, I just thought it was Arthur Christmas. I have another one I like, but it's Arthur Christmas. Great. I love this movie. Haven't seen it in a while though.
I think
So.
I might have seen it one time.
But yeah, Arthur Christmas, great film. Looking forward to talking about it.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of It's Always Sunny in Hollywood. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until then, shop smart. Shop S-Mart.